When I say the term legendary ninja, who do you think of? Do you think of Madara? Do you think of Hashirama, Naruto, Sasuke, Minato? Most of these people tend to come from Konoha. But if you step outside of the confines of our Konoha-centric view on Naruto history, who do you think of? Do you think of the third Raikage A, or the fourth Raikage A, or Killer B? Or do you step outside of the Hidden Cloud and think of members of the Akatsuki like Kisame and Kakuzu? Or do you go to another infamous group and think of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist? And here's the thing, while all of those characters that I just listed are historically powerful and incredibly important ninja, truly, when I say the term ninjas of legend, only one name should come to mind. See, while Minato and Madara and Hashirama, the Akatsuki, and the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist all played incredibly important roles in the deep tapestry of history that is the Naruto universe, there is one man who rises above all of those other ninjas in terms of importance. See, the problem with people like Minato, Madara, Hashirama, the Akatsuki, or the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist is that while they were around, they burned incredibly brightly, but unfortunately, since they burned so brightly, they burnt out quick. Sure, Hashirama and Madara existed during the Warring States period and founded Konoha, and Hashirama was the Hokage of Konoha for almost 2 decades. And sure, Minato was a war hero of the Second and Third Great Shinobi World Wars and managed to be the 4th Hokage all in a short 24-year lifespan. These are men who merely dipped a toe into the bucket of history that is Naruto, a chapter in a massive book. But there is one man who's in every single chapter. A man who participated in every single one of the Shinobi Great World Wars. A man who outlived dozens of other Gokage. A man who led one of the most powerful villages in the entire Naruto universe for over 5 decades. A man who fought Madara and survived twice. In fact, a man whom Madara said during the 4th Great Shinobi World War would be the only person who would prove problematic for him. A man who wields a kage toda so powerful that anything or anybody unfortunate enough to fall into its grasps, it's turned into dust. That man, if you haven't caught on already, is none other than Inoki, the 3rd Tsuchikage of the Hidden Stone Village, and inarguably one of the most important people in Naruto's history. A man who lived from the founding of the first ninja villages all the way to Boruto, the human encapsulation of the shifting tides of ninja sentiments throughout 100 years. You can throw a dart into the century-long timeline between the foundation of all of the ninja villages and Boruto, and wherever it will land, if you go to Inoki, he will be a perfect encapsulation of the current relations between ninjas in the ninja world. This is a man who at the age of 79 years old managed to be one of the most important fighters in the 4th Great Shinobi World War. A man who outsurvived Hashirama, Tobirama, Hiruzen, Minato, the 3rd Raikage, Yagura, the entirety of the Akatsuki. He outlived Madara twice, and he didn't do it by running away or avoiding a fight. He did it by living through Iwa's principles to the fullest. And today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into this incredibly important but vastly underrated character. So sit back, relax, and take out your rocks, because today, we're going to the Hidden Stone Village. But before we go anywhere, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you guys like the idea of me stepping out of Konoha, you're really gonna like my other YouTube channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime. And if you just love the idea of me talking about anime, you're gonna love my podcast, Otaku's Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But before we get into all that, today we gotta talk about a brand new sponsor to the page, Rakuten. Rakuten is the world's largest cashback site with over 3,500 sites that you can get cash back from simply by using Rakuten. All you have to do is open Rakuten, search up whatever brand you're looking for, click that brand, and then boom, cashback applied that easily. See, I've been using Rakuten for years, pretty much since college. But as I spent more and more time on Rakuten, I realized it was for so much more than just manga and video games and cosplay components. When I was in college, I was still a degenerate weeb, which means I still needed all my degenerate weeb things like Funko Pops and manga and wigs for cosplays. See, Rakuten's all about making your money go as far as it possibly can for you. So whether you're looking for everyday essentials or figurines and Funko Pops or cosplays, Rakuten's got your back. Back when I had to stretch a dollar way further than I have to today, Rakuten came in clutch, which is why getting cash back at places like Barnes & Noble, where I could pick up my manga, or Target, where I could pick up video games, was massive. Not to mention I could also get cash back at places like eBay so I could pick up statues and figurines. You can pick up gaming monitors from Best Buy, comfy shoes to stand in huge con lines from Nike. You can even get cash back on hotel chains like Best Western, so when you go to your 4th con this summer in a city you don't live in, you can make the con experience that much cheaper. And all you have to do to sign up today is click the link in my description, and when you sign up, you'll get a $30 bonus with a qualifying purchase. Yes, that's right, all you have to do is click the link in my description to sign up for Rakuten, and you will get a $30 sign-up bonus with a qualifying purchase. Listen, we work hard for our money. It's about time we made our money work hard for us. So Inoki, a character as old as the concept of ninja villages. But Inoki wasn't always the 79-year-old man we saw on the battlefield of the 4th Great Shinobi World War. However, unfortunately, because the majority of Inoki's screen time does come through the medium of the 4th Great Shinobi World War, a lot of people tend to miss out on the huge and massive and very well fleshed out character that is Inoki. So far as characters in the Naruto universe go, we know a ton about Inoki, starting with when Inoki was an adolescent in the early founding days of Iwakagure. So let's start this video off in the way that we tend to start these videos off, at the beginning, with Inoki's adolescence. See, the first time, chronologically, that we ever get to know Inoki as a character is when we see him cleaning Iwa's stone monument. Now, for those of you who don't know or don't remember, Iwa has a monument, much in the same way that Konoha has a monument. However, as Konoha's monument is a stone monument of a fire to symbolize the will of fire that burns in the heart of every single member of Konoha, Iwa has a stone. And if you think a stone on a pedestal is a stupid memorialization of Iwa's general sentiment that burns deeply in their heart, you're not alone there. See, the reason that we saw this flashback is because Inoki, while he was cleaning this stone monument to make sure it's glistening as a stone, was joined by his grandfather, who happened to be the first Tsuchikage. And while Inoki is talking to his grandfather, it's revealed to us that Inoki believes that his grandfather is some cheap old man for making this simple stone the symbol of Iwa. But during this conversation, his grandfather reveals to Inoki that it's not about frugality, and that instead the stone actually symbolizes the iron and unshakable will of the citizens of Iwa. The real drive-home message here from the first Tsuchikage is that the rock on the podium actually doesn't matter. See, as Inoki is rubbing this rock on this pedestal, the first Tsuchikage picks it up and throws it away into a pile of other rocks, and picks up a completely new and random rock and places that on the pedestal. And by doing this, the first Tsuchikage is trying to show Inoki that the rock itself doesn't matter. It's what's inside the rock. It's what the rock symbolizes. And that if you can ascertain the worth of a rock by knowing what's inside the rock, that's when you begin to truly understand what it is to be from Iwa. And that the collective totality of the citizenship of Iwa are each of these individual rocks that could be placed up on this pedestal. The reason that the symbol of Iwa is one feeble, ugly, somewhat meaningless rock is because in actuality, the symbol of Iwa are those who live within it. And it's at this point that the first Tsuchikage tells Inoki that he can see the worth of his rock. And the first Tsuchikage reveals to Inoki that within Inoki, he sees the power to change the world. However, if Inoki doesn't face his problems and his enemies with 100% of his determination, that will and ability to change the world will disappear. And thus Inoki has to make sure to live by the tenets of Iwakagure and have an unshakable, unmovable determination in the face of all adversaries. And there would be many adversaries in Inoki's life. But the true beauty of Inoki's character is that he takes this lesson that he learns from his grandfather about determining somebody's worth and will by looking beyond their exterior and by looking into their heart to determine their true character and what their motivations in life are, and he applies it to every situation in his 100-year life. However, because of this, sometimes that lesson brings Inoki to combat, while other times it brings him to peace. See, determining the will of a person standing across from you is as important in peacetime as it is in the middle of a war. And Inoki would prove over and over again during the course of his incredibly long life that he had the ability to very aptly read the wavelength of somebody's soul. And truly, the first situation in which Inoki would be forced to do this is very early in his life. See, the problem with being born around the times that the ninja villages were founded is that it was kind of an unknown territory for everybody. That meant as the concept of ninja villages was being kind of explored, Inoki was also going through an explorative process himself. He was growing, he was in his adolescence. But it also means that young Inoki had to deal with a lot of the drama that revolved around the early days of ninja villages. And that drama, especially for Iwa, came in the form of Madara. See, Inoki is the grandson of the Tsuchikage in an incredibly militaristic village that is Iwa, started working his way towards becoming a shinobi at a very young age. So much so that basically as early as he could, he began training with the first Tsuchikage's personal guard, Mu, who later became the second Tsuchikage, in all things dust release. And because Inoki was more or less a genius, considering the fact that he figured out his lightweight boulder technique that allowed him to fly at the age of like 6 or 7 or whenever he was having this conversation with his grandfather, Inoki mastered the Keke Toda dust release with relative ease, making him only the second ever ninja to do that, we think. However, even though Mu and Inoki both mastered one of the strongest jutsus in the entirety of Naruto, a Keke Toda that combines earth, wind, and fire and is able to annihilate anything it touches, when Madara realized that he wanted all of the other ninja villages to be subservient to Konoha, the first stop he made along the way was in Iwa, where he confronted Mu and Inoki and told them even though there was a peace treaty between their villages, that Iwa should be subservient to Konoha as they're weaker, and that anything that Konoha tells Iwa to do, they should do. At this point that Mu, Inoki, and Madara had a battle that Madara won. But during this battle, even though Madara was substantially stronger than both Mu and Inoki realized that he was living up to the prophecy that he needed to face all of his adversaries with 100% determination. And thus, even though Madara beat him down, he continually got back up again to battle against Madara. Now, since Madara was just going to Iwa to show Iwa the true strength of Konoha, and more specifically himself, he let both Mu and Inoki live, as Mu went on to later be killed by Gengetsu Hozuki while he was killing Gengetsu Hozuki, and Inoki doesn't die until Boruto. Because this, Inoki is actually the only one of the Kage heading into the 4th Great Shinobi World's War who battled against Madara while he was still alive. In fact, it makes him the only person alive in the 4th Great Shinobi World War to truly understand what Madara coming back to life could mean. But the incredibly complicated life of Inoki does not stop there. See, if we use Konoha as a way to create a timeline here and estimate that Hashirama was the first Hokage for anywhere between 20 and 25 years, and Hashirama died before the 1st Great Shinobi World War, that means that between villages being founded in the 1st Great Shinobi World War, there was about 25-ish years. And since we know that Mu and Gengetsu Hozuki actually kill each other in the 1st Great Shinobi World War, as when they're brought back during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, they believe that Tobirama brought them back, which means they died before Tobirama, who also died in the 1st Great Shinobi World War. This means that Inoki, who was fully in his adolescence when the village was founded, as his grandfather was the first Tsuchikage, and he was like a 6-year-old running around polishing stones, even though he looked old because he's always looked old. That means that Inoki took over as the 3rd Tsuchikage in the 1st Great Shinobi World War. Yes, in less than 3 decades from its founding, Iwa was on its 3rd Tsuchikage. And while obviously Konoha was in the same situation with Hiruzen becoming the 3rd Hokage during the 1st Great Shinobi World War, Inoki's situation was a bit different. You see, because Konoha was an incredibly wealthy country. While every single country and village was absolutely devastated by the 1st Great Shinobi World War, the money that Konoha made by selling the tailed beasts got them out of the hardships of the recovery from the 1st Great Shinobi World War. But Iwa didn't have that. All that Iwa had was an incredibly dense population of people willing to fight and die for their country. And yet, in the very short lifespan of Iwa, they had already lost 2 of the most important and powerful fighters. Not only had they lost the first Tsuchikage, who sat in on the 5 Kage summit when Hashirama sold them the tailed beast, but they also lost the man who protected the first Tsuchikage and followed in his footsteps to become the 2nd Tsuchikage in the first war that Iwa was ever involved in. This was undoubtedly a time of grave unrest in Iwa, a village with next to no natural resources, losing at the one thing it was supposed to be good at: war. And thus Inoki, very much pun intended here, had to take Iwa onto his back. Inoki had to live as a symbol of the sheer determination that was supposed to be represented by the citizens of Iwa. Inoki had to lead one of the most densely populated villages through the darkest time in its history at the age of at most 30, after fighting a battle against a seemingly impossibly strong foe, losing his grandfather and his teacher. But the hardships during Inoki's reign don't end there. See, 20 years after the conclusion of the 1st Great Shinobi World War, there was a second one. We know this because there was a 20-year armistice signed that's meant to represent the distance between World War I and World War II. And much in the same capacity of World War I and World War II, the 2nd Great Shinobi World War happened because of the economic disparity created by the fallout of the First War. And thus countries that were hit particularly hard by the economic disparity of the fallout of a war, like Iwa, decided to militarize themselves in order to take over valuable land. See, Inoki realized that his country was struggling. You can't eat rocks. And thus Inoki decided to capitalize on the one thing that his country had: people with iron wills and determination to make sure that Iwa becomes the most powerful country on Earth. And thus Iwa engaged in a land war with Konoha, hoping to take some of their fertile land in order to close the economic disparity between Konoha and them. However, on the way to this land war with Konoha was the Hidden Rain. And while it's obviously not as well documented as Konoha's losses in the Second Great Shinobi World War, Iwa also took massive losses in this war. They never marched through the Hidden Rain, as all the information we know about this war shows it happening in the Hidden Rain. The only possible exception being Minato's new one-shot, where we see Minato, Jiraiya, and a couple other no-name characters teleport away from Iwa's two Jinchuriki, trying to hit them with a tailed beast ball. And we don't exactly know where this battle was happening. It didn't seem to be in downtown Ame, but in the great words of Samuel Jackson, the absence of evidence does not mean an evidence of absence. So this battle between Han, Roshi, Minato, and Jiraiya could have been happening in Ame. However, we do have evidence that at least Hanzo believed that the Hidden Stone would have a reason for being in Ame, as the way that Danzo got Hanzo to battle against the Akatsuki is he dressed a bunch of his Anbu members up like Hidden Stone Shinobi and then had the Akatsuki kill them. So clearly Hanzo and the Akatsuki knew that Iwa was somewhere in Ame causing a fuss. However, once again, the only time that we ever see Konoha and Iwa fighting is in Minato's one-shot. Now, this is probably a system of the fact that we have very little information about the Second Great Shinobi World War, but basically what it proves to us is that either Iwa was turned away by Ame, just like Konoha, or they simply never got past Ame. Meaning, much in a similar capacity to how the First Great Shinobi World War was a massive failure for Iwa, so was the second. But both of those wars paled in comparison to the third. See, by the time Inoki is in his mid-50s, which we actually believe in the Naruto universe to be pretty much peak fighting form, with the likes of Jiraiya and Kakashi not really hitting their peaks until about 50. But in just 2 decades as Tsuchikage, Inoki has tried twice to expand the lands of Iwa beyond the cavernous, craggy, rocky landscape that they currently exist on. Sure, Iwa is built into a mountain. Sure, the majority of the buildings are built out of rocks, and it is basically the perfect defense, but nobody has ever launched an offensive against Iwa. There's no reason to, really. Battles have been waged with Iwa, but no one's ever marched into Iwa trying to take it. Even Madara was just trying to force them into subservience. But giving up due to repeated failure flies directly in the face of what Iwa supposedly stands for. And thus Inoki would never give up his grand dream of one day making Iwa a rich country with fertile lands that can self-sustain, a country built on more than militaristic and determined attitudes. And thus, as the Second Great Shinobi World War rolled into the third, Iwa once again militarized and got ready for combat. However, what Inoki didn't know is that the Third Great Shinobi World War would be the bloodiest yet, especially for Iwa. See, the Third Great Shinobi World War is known as the bloodiest conflict in Naruto's history until the Fourth Great Shinobi World War because every single major village was involved. And more or less, the Third Great Shinobi World War can be summed up as everybody versus Konoha. The Hidden Mist stole Rin, put Isobu in her, tried to send her back so Isobu would freak out in the middle of Konoha and destroy Konoha. Sasori got the nickname Sasori of the Red Sand, fighting a defensive battle against a counter-offensive by Konoha. We see Minato, the Fourth Raikage, and Killer Bee come to blows. But more than anything, it was known as the bloodiest conflict in Naruto's history because of the battle between Iwa and Konoha. Two highly populated, highly militarized countries going at each other as hard as they possibly could. See, the best accounts that we have of the Third Great Shinobi World War come from the accounts of Kakashi and Minato, most specifically as he took on the Kanami Bridge mission. But as we know, the Kanami Bridge mission was a shifting point in the Third Great Shinobi World War. Until the Kanami Bridge mission, Iwa was actually winning against Konoha, as they were pushing into the Hidden Grass, a small village between Konoha and Iwa, and setting up a satellite camp there. However, if Konoha were to destroy Kanami Bridge, they would cut off an access point for Iwa to enter into the Hidden Grass. And obviously, at the cost of Obito's life, Konoha is successful in this endeavor, crippling Iwa's ability to march anywhere near Konoha and making it pretty much all but certain that Iwa would stand no chance against Konoha in any future battles. However, this wasn't the only place that Iwa was facing massive losses. See, once again, in the early stages of the war, Iwa was incredibly successful against the Hidden Cloud, so much so that they forced the Hidden Cloud to retreat from an offensive that they were pushing into Iwa's territory. However, pursuing that retreat to maximize the losses that the Hidden Cloud would go through was one of the biggest tactical failures in Naruto's history, as the third Raikage, known as the Perfect Shield, would stay behind for 3 whole days in battle against 10,000, probably Iwa Shinobis, it's never been confirmed, and kill thousands of them to cover his soldiers' retreat. Now, obviously, at the end of this battle, the fourth Raikage dies, and that is a pretty decisive blow to the Hidden Cloud's fighting ability, but had a son, the fourth Raikage, who was almost as powerful as he was. And had an assistant he really liked by the name of Darui, who he taught Black Lightning to, and thus taking this one man's life cost Iwa thousands of men and no tactical advantage whatsoever. So now Iwa and Inoki are losing a battle on 2 fronts, and they're hemorrhaging their most important asset, people willing to fight and die for the village. And thus Iwa, once again, for a 3rd time in a row under Inoki's rule, faces defeat, with now a substantially smaller fighting force and no more land to show for it. However, fortunately, the Leaf was currently being led by an incredibly benevolent man by the name of Hiruzen, who, upon realizing that Konoha had subdued the forces of all 4 other countries, decided to reach out to all of these 4 other countries looking for peace. And thus, when this possible peace treaty got to the Iwa Council, they decided they wouldn't take Hiruzen up on it. They had once had Konoha on the ropes, they could do it again. However, Inoki in this moment actually exercises caution. See, Inoki, even though he once believed in Iwa's ability to march into Konoha and steal their land, now was much less certain of that. Stating that he didn't doubt the power of the unity of the stone, Inoki acknowledges the fact that they sent 1,000 shinobi to battle against Konoha, and it took but one man to turn them back: Minato, Yellow Flash. It's in this moment that Inoki begins to realize that the unity of the stone isn't as powerful as it once was. That other villages have spawned these monsters like the third Raikage and Minato, who are able to reflect back the power of the unity of the stone by themselves. And thus Inoki's ideology begins to switch. See, Inoki in this moment begins to stop looking at the hidden stone like Russia in a land war against the Germans in World War II, trying to throw numbers at the situation in hopes that one day the other side will run out, and begins to realize that the true strength of the unity of the stone, the lesson that his grandfather was trying to teach him almost 40 years ago, doesn't actually become the unity of the stone until you realize that every stone can sit on the pedestal. That is to say that every single stone, every single soul in Iwa is just as important as any other one. And in this moment, Inoki begins to prioritize what has always been Iwa's strongest asset: the people. Now, unfortunately, the way that Inoki goes about prioritizing the lives of his people is a little bit ungentlemanly, but it is in line with what a ninja would do. See, Iwa, and specifically Inoki, would gain a reputation for being incredibly untrustworthy. But this isn't rare amongst ninja villages. Hidden Cloud, the Hidden Mist, and the Hidden Sand are all also incredibly underhanded. The Hidden Mist tried to sneak a tailed beast into the center of Konoha using a little girl. The Hidden Cloud tried to steal Hinata under the guise of signing a peace treaty. Hidden Sand launched an attack on Konoha under the guise of participating in the Chunin exams. Using underhanded tactics to get exactly what you want in the ninja world is nothing new, though Iwa were a bit of an exception, as they were known to be incredibly underhanded and not trustable whatsoever, which is very well exemplified by the fact that even after an armistice was signed that ended the Third Great Shinobi World War, that's when Iwa sent 1,000 shinobi, assuming that Konoha's guard would be down. And it was then, and only then, that these 1,000 shinobi were turned away. After which an additional peace treaty was created that actually ended the Third Great Shinobi World War and caused Hiruzen to step down. But in the face of utter defeat, what did Inoki do? Inoki had now been the Tsuchikage through 3 losing wars and basically achieved nothing. Well, this is actually kind of where Inoki starts his villain arc, as after the conclusion of the Third Great Shinobi World War, Inoki begins to hire the Akatsuki for basically anything the village needs. But he has a rationale for this. See, after the conclusion of the Third Great Shinobi World War, there was supposed to be a disarmament period, where villages wouldn't research ninjutsu, they would downsize their militaries in order to fulfill the armistice. However, not everybody did this. While places like the Hidden Sand did shrink their military, they started to use the Akatsuki to fill those gaps, as you don't need a military if you have the money to pay for the Akatsuki to figure out any problem that you might have. But not all countries began a disarmament period. In fact, other countries took advantage of other countries disarming and decided to use that time to arm themselves. And the country that did that was the Hidden Cloud. The Hidden Cloud realized that there would probably be an end to this armistice, like there has been 3 times prior, or two times prior. And therefore, to be ahead for the inevitable fourth Great Shinobi World War, the Hidden Cloud decided to ramp up their ninjutsu skills and their militarization. And they have a track record of doing this. Even after the armistice signed after the fourth Great Shinobi World War, the Hidden Cloud went on to create a chakra cannon that could destroy the moon. But people knew that the Hidden Cloud was moving this way. Specifically, the Hidden Stone knew the Hidden Cloud was doing this. And thus, instead of increasing the size of their military or ramping up the ninjutsu they have in their arsenal, Inoki started to hire the Akatsuki, as the Akatsuki were a highly trained military group that was able to fulfill any military needs they would need at a low cost. And this is representative of the fact that Inoki started to realize that Iwa's most valuable commodity was the people. And that should have come down to it in this armistice, an era of peace were to come to an end, that Iwa wouldn't be left with its pants around its ankles, as they would be able to employ the Akatsuki to battle against the further militarization of places like the Hidden Cloud. But this isn't the only change that Inoki makes during the course of his long life. See, when Inoki heads into this 5 Kage summit prior to the fourth Great Shinobi World War, he heads in as a man who has lived a longer life than any of the other people he's sitting across. And thus he heads into this meeting with some ideas about decorum and the ways that villages should operate, most specifically stating that seeking aid from other villages after the loss of a Jinchuriki isn't something that a village should ever do, as the loss of a Jinchuriki is not only embarrassing, but something that a village should figure out on its own. Which is why, even in the face of losing Han and Roshi, the 2 Jinchuriki that existed within the Hidden Stone for almost 2 decades, Inoki never reached out to any of the other villages. However, after hearing Gaara out during the 5 Kage summit and Danzo revealing himself to be a traitor trying to use Koto Matsukame to control Mifune into assigning Danzo to be the leader of the Shinobi Alliance, and then Sasuke pulling up on the 5 Kage summit, almost dying to Inoki, and then Tobi coming and announcing the start of the fourth Great Shinobi World War, Inoki decides to join the Shinobi Alliance, but not for the right reasons. See, Inoki actually initially joins the Shinobi Alliance because he knows that if he joins the Shinobi Alliance, that nobody will be suspicious of him. See, Inoki realizes that the other 4 villages will be highly involved in this battle against Madara and the Akatsuki. And thus, as they're battling against this incredibly powerful foe, these 4 villages will be at their absolute weakest. And thus Inoki originally joins the Shinobi Alliance because he was hoping that the 4 villages would be so preoccupied with their battle against the Akatsuki and Madara that Iwa would be able to go behind their backs and take their land, cementing Iwa as the strongest country in the world. And if you think about it, why wouldn't he try to do this? See, Inoki has been through something that none of the other Gokage at that table have been through. Inoki was there for the founding of the village, fought in the first Great Shinobi World War and lost, fought in the second Great Shinobi World War and lost, fought in the third Great Shinobi World War, tried to cheat and lost. And every single day, the unity of the stone was crumbling in his hand. But all Inoki ever truly wanted was a thriving and powerful and prosperous Iwa. And thus, as these 4 other nations who he's been battling against for the entirety of his life, all of a sudden one day want to come together and battle against a foe who he once fought against, who he is the only person sitting at that table understands the true strength of, why wouldn't he take this opportunity to finally achieve the dream he's been working towards for 79 years? But in the end, Inoki doesn't take this easy way out. See, it is truly not until Inoki is 79 years old that he begins to flourish into the man that he always could have been. See, while Inoki joined the Shinobi Alliance with the wrong intentions, as he spent more time around the likes of Gaara and Naruto, he began to realize something. See, Inoki began to realize that the unity of the stone can go beyond the stone. The problem with the unity of the stone is that it always put the stone at odds with everything around the stone. While any stone could be plucked out of the water and placed on the pedestal, we were only considering stones. Inoki, a master of looking beyond the exterior of a human being to see their will and determination that fuels them, finally spent enough time around people not from his village to be able to apply that practice to people from outside his village. And what Inoki realized is that the unity of the stone exists outside the stone, and that the worlds that Gaara and Naruto and all the other Gokage were striving towards was beyond the unity of the stone, but unity of the 5 nations. Unity of the earth, the water, the lightning, the fire, and the wind, all brought together through the massive unifying force that is a battle against a man who once tried to push his village into subservience. And thus Inoki, instead of being underhanded, actually joins the Shinobi Alliance and becomes arguably one of the most powerful fighters in it. A man responsible for stopping the first meteor, a man who took out multiple Susanoo-cladded Madara clones, a man who picked himself up out of the dirt and spurned the other 4 Hokage to do the same when Madara was shoving their face into it. A man who, well out of his prime, was identified by Madara to be one of the biggest threats in the Shinobi Alliance to him. See, a lifetime of loss in pursuit of a dream had made Inoki misconstrue the message his grandfather gave him as a child. Inoki had begun to think that the concept of unity could only ever be achieved in Iwa, as the stones that were placed on the pedestal to replace other stones were only ever pulled from the pools of Iwa. But the message that his grandfather was trying to convey to Inoki went far beyond that. See, the first Tsuchikage was trying to tell Inoki that unity is a strength, and when you begin to look at everybody through the lens of staring past their exterior and only focusing on what drives them and what wakes them up in the morning is truly when you can achieve unity. And thus, as Inoki began to stare into the souls of people not from Iwa and see the strength of the stone within them, he realized that unity only gets stronger the further it grows. And thus, it truly wasn't until the 4th Great Shinobi World War, when Inoki was 79 years old, did he realize his true strength. Even as his back was blowing out, Inoki used his lightweight boulder to save men and women he had never met before. He rallied the other Hokage to battle against Madara, even though their death would have been advantageous to Iwa taking over their territory after the war. He stood side by side with men and women who had either tried to suppress or who had been suppressed by Iwa, all because he realized that the true strength of unity can be applied to much more than your brethren, and that any rock, regardless of where that rock is pulled from, can be placed on the pedestal. Any rock can hide a worthwhile interior, and those rocks with craggy exteriors that hide interiors of sheer determination can come from places that were once deemed not worthy. But Inoki isn't the only person who makes that realization during the 4th Great Shinobi World War. In fact, you could state that everybody in the ninja world made that realization during the 4th Great Shinobi World War, which is once again why I state that Inoki is the barometer of the ninja world. He was apprehensive and underhanded heading into the 5 Kage Summit prior to the 4th Great Shinobi World War, but so was everybody else. He was desperate for a victory by the time the 3rd Great Shinobi World War came along because he didn't know if his country would be able to sustain itself if they didn't win. But then again, so was everybody else. He was afraid of building a village in a time of economic disparity, and thus he launched a campaign to gain valuable land in the 2nd Great Shinobi World War. But that's where everyone else was as well. He was trying to figure out the identity of a blossoming village in the early days of Village Foundation, but so was everybody else. But where Inoki separates himself from the crowd is that he physically had to deal with Konoha's domineering effects. When Madara kicked down the doors of Iwa and battled against Mu and Inoki and told them that they were to exist as subservient fellows to Konoha for the rest of their existence, that was a subliminal message to everybody else that Inoki had to live through physically. See, because that is the role that Konoha took for the rest of the ninja world for the rest of ninja history. That's why the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Great Shinobi World Wars were waged in the first place. Economic disparity and the fact that Konoha had a massive step up in strength over all of the other villages. But Inoki had to physically live through that sentiment, as Madara made it very clear to him where they existed on the totem pole, setting Inoki on a lifetime journey to rally against that sentiment, to raise Iwa's place on the totem pole. But it wasn't until he realized that the most important thing is that everybody was on the same totem pole that Inoki truly began to understand what unity could look like. He's the only man to live through all 4 Great Shinobi World Wars and the after effects of each. And thus he is truly the only man who can symbolize almost all of Naruto's history, which is why I find him to be one of the most, if not the most interesting character in Naruto. What do you guys think? Do you love Inoki? Do you think that he should have gotten more screen time or a more fleshed out backstory? Tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I don't put him here. He climbs up here, and then I try to find a way to make a 75-pound pit bull comfortable in my lap while I record a YouTube video. You have no idea how sweaty I am currently.